Well, good evening, everyone. This is John Craig,
And this is Sandy.
and welcome back to Walking in Spirit and Truth. We're glad that you're joining us this evening.
And anyway, we want to just say too, if you are enjoying these broadcasts, please join us and partner with us through our website at LOW at life. Oh, that's our email, LOW at lifeofworshipamarillo.org. But lifeofworshipamarillo.org is our website, and we have a donate button on there, and you can click on that and join us and partner with us for the different ministries that we have here, including getting this word out. And we would truly appreciate it. And so, with that being said, we're going to go start. We're going to start with where we left off, which we are on Psalm 23, verse 4. We've already had part 1, and we are going to go ahead and read the scripture. So, open your word up to Psalm 23, and we're going to read, actually, well, let's read the whole thing tonight, and then we're going to center in on verse 4.
All righty then. So, Psalm 23, beginning with verse 1, a psalm of David. Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
All right, I'm back. So when we think of this, we're going to, like I said, focus in on verse 4. We already talked about even though I walk through, and we're going to talk about the valley of the shadow of death tonight. And we're going to look at the words and see what we can find. And maybe we'll figure out some new facts that we never learned before. Maybe not. I hope so. I hope that's what we do. But in general, we have talked about the valley of shadow of death as people. It's said in society by believers and non-believers alike. And when you think of the valley, or you're going through a valley, in that and in and of itself is oftentimes symbolic of rough times or troubled times or a threatening situation or a place lined with danger, with predators, with difficulties. And you say, hey, I'm walking through the valley. And it's not necessarily a short walk. Usually when you say that, like something like that, you're going through a time of trouble. You're going through a time of testing. And so those words come forth, and you're wanting to get back to the mountaintop, knowing that we don't live on the mountaintop. To get to the mountaintop, though, we have to go through the valleys. And so we have this metaphor for troubled times whenever you hear the valley. And then when you add shadow of death with it, that's pretty treacherous. That seems life-threatening when you say those words. But I want us to look at valleys in general for just a moment, because in Joshua 7:26 we hear about the valley of calamity, or the valley of Achor. And so let's read that.
And they raised over him a great heap of stones that stands to this day. And Yahweh turned from the fierceness of his anger. Therefore, the name of that place has been called the Valley of Achor to this day.
Okay. Now, if you wonder what that is, of course, geographically, it's situated northwest of Jericho on the border of the tribe of Judah. And it's the place where the Israelites executed Achan and his household. Achor means trouble. It means affliction or taboo. And it implies that trouble is happening. Now, if you think about what was actually occurring at the time for this to be so named, Israel had experienced this great victory at the Battle of Jericho. And Achan, or Achan, whichever you want to say, is a member of the tribe of what? He's the tribe of Judah. And he directly disobeyed Yah's commands and kept the spoils of Jericho for himself. God had ordered that all the spoils be consecrated for himself only. So on the next fight against Ai, a much weaker city than Jericho, actually, but the battle ended in humiliation, which you read in Joshua 7, verses 2-5. And so Yahweh revealed to Joshua that the reason that they lost was because he was angry because of Achan's act of disobedience. And what happens is he ends up dying and he's buried here. And this is what this valley is named after. It's a valley of trouble. And it's a valley of remembrance of what he had done. And so one more time, we have the valley associated with what? What's the word? Trouble. And we actually have some pictures of that place. If you will pop those up. So
Yeah, there's one shot there, and there's another shot right there.
okay, there we go. And so this is the actual place where those things occurred. Now, we can also look at the word valley in Psalm 84:6, and you can keep those up if you want, at least for a moment. But it talks about the valley of weeping. Now, this could be specifically one of two valleys. It could be the valley of Achor or Rephaim, the valley of Rephaim. And so we've already looked at the two possibilities of Achor, but let's look at at Rephaim real quick, the valley of Rephaim. And so that's the other possibility of what this is referring to. So now let's jump over to Psalm 84, verse 6, and we can read this specifically, what it's speaking of at this point when it speaks of the valley of weeping or the valley of weep, because some say that that word can only be translated as weep. And it actually could refer to a resin that was weeping from a tree as well. So let's look at Psalm 84:6.
All right, so Psalm 84:6, passing through the valley of Baca, they make it a spring. The early rain also covers it with blessings.
All right. So that's that with that. Now we're going to jump over to Hosea 2, verses 14 through 15.
By the way, there's a little where it says Valley of Baca. I have a side note, probably weeping of balsam trees, like you had said. Weeping.
Yes, right. And we can see it definitely covered with trees at the Valley of Rephaim. So Hosea 2, 14 through 15. And this is going to go back to the Valley of Achor. It's going to be speaking of the Valley of Trouble. Hosea 2, 14 through 15.
Therefore, behold, I will allure her, bring her into the wilderness, and speak kindly to her. Then I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor is the door of hope. And she will sing there as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she came up from the land of Egypt.
Now, at this point, we have something presented. We can go back to full screen. We have something presented here that is completely opposite of trouble. It seems like blessing is about to flow from this direction, which to me, if you hear it spoken of as trouble and is also blessing, it is that contronym where there's the good and the bad side, depending on what our actions are. And that's true with life, isn't it? In fact, I think tonight we are going to look at the different words in the phrase, the valley of the shadow of death, and find out that we see just that very thing. But up to this point, when you look at this psalm specifically, David has been speaking to the reader. He has been saying, hey, let me tell you about Yahweh. Let me tell you about the Lord is my shepherd. And then he gets to this phrase of the valley of the shadow of death. And he makes that statement. And all of a sudden, from here forth, he changes who he's speaking to. He puts it aside what he was doing before, speaking to the reader. And now he starts to speak to Yah himself. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So here he has switched who he's addressing. It's like he was writing and he started to think of the things and the circumstances he was going through. And all of a sudden he was encouraged and he was reminded that Yahweh is Yahweh and he belongs to him. Therefore, he has no fear and he runs into the presence of Yah. So what is this picture for us? That when we go through the valleys of life, the valleys of deep darkness, because as we look at it here in a moment, that's what we're talking about. We run into the presence of God if we are his, and if we are following his way and his instructions. When we have that intimacy, we run into that intimacy with Yahweh, and we are going to be protected. Now, that is a general view that we look at this verse to mean. But I want us to go into the valley of the shadow of death now. And we're going to look at some pictures, because if you didn't know this, there is an actual valley of the shadow of death. Yes, There is. And I want you to pay close attention as you look at them, because we're going to talk about the circumstances that exist as you walk through this valley, because they may not be just the simple walk in the park that we like to enjoy. Therefore, it does have great meaning in this verse as it's spoken. Okay, let's go to the next one. That one didn't take up the screen, so it's somewhat hard to see. Okay, look at these walls of this valley. That's pretty steep, wouldn't you say? Now,
Yeah, they're vertical.
vertical. I don't know that I would want to be trying to climb up those. So we have this valley, the valley of the shadow of death, that actually exists. And it's this steep and this deep, narrow canyon. And the sun actually only hits the bottom of it when it's directly overhead at high noon. Think about that. The rest of the time, the bottom of the canyon is actually dark. It's shadowed, it's dark. So David probably led his sheep through the valley of the shadow of death as he was growing up. Yeah, maybe he did that. And the tradition holds that this actual valley is located parallel to the Jordan to the south of Jericho in the Judean hills. Now, I want to talk about the temperature of this place. The temperature reaches 104 degrees Fahrenheit, but if you're on Celsius, it's 40 degrees Celsius during the summer months in the valley. And so this extreme climate had to be dealt with as well as this journey. Last week we talked about a good shepherd would lead you from one place to another pasture to graze during certain times of the year. And this valley was one of the places that connected one grazing land to the next grazing land. So this 17-mile long path through the Wadi Kelt, it actually had a lot of danger connected to it as well, because you would have to deal with wild animals and thieves, and the thieves would be hiding in the many caves, and the grazing conditions made it necessary for the sheep to move through this valley seasonally. Now, some say they're a part of this valley that's 4.5 miles long that you would look, but the whole Wadi Kelt is 17. And the shepherds had their flocks go through the valley in the morning hours. Because the valley was so narrow, you didn't want two flocks of sheep coming one way or the other. In the morning, the sheep went one way, and in the evening, they went another way. So there wouldn't be any stopping what was happening there, because you would definitely have a traffic jam if you had two flocks going in different directions. So
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, I think about the different, like around here, we've got the Paladura Canyon. The fact that it is a canyon, second largest canyon in the United States, you do get full sun a good portion of the day. So I'm thinking about this canyon here, is that's pretty uh, that's pretty serious. I mean, you're just in the dark all the time. And anyway, that's kind of it's very interesting. I was also noticing down here at the bottom of this is it is a narrow path, if you can see where my cursor is, and there's just not a lot. If you've got a flock of sheep to be running through there, there's just not a lot of room to be going. So, oh wow, what an amazing picture, an amazing scene here, and it really gives pictures of the shadow of death. I mean, anything can happen.
yes. And in fact, mules haven't been able to make the trip for centuries. Now, here's something that's interesting, is that a road was actually built. And by the way, where you see that little building over there on the screen, that is actually a monastery that was built supposedly around the cave that was where the prophet Elijah hid out. Yes. When he was in exile and he was fed by the ravens. Yes, right there. That's supposed to be built around the cave where Elijah was fed by the ravens, which is very interesting. We actually just taught that in our kids school on Shabbat. But this road that was built here is said to be the road that the Good Samaritan had traveled and found who had been beaten by thieves and passing countrymen, was actually supposed to be on this very road that was through the valley of the shadow of death. So it does have some history to it. And
That's absolutely amazing. You look out, they carved this. There's like stair steps running over on this the left side of this cave.
Well, I
Like,
would not be climbing up those stair steps.
well, yeah, I mean, certainly there, but it creates different shade. But you can see, I mean, this is a big cave. Wow, that's an amazing work of architecture and patient labor to build all of that around. Wow, that's just amazing. Okay, sorry, I was distracted.
Yes, you
I want to go
were.
there. I want to go there. I want to check it out.
I would not, if we go there, I would not even think about climbing down those stairs. No way. None. No, nada. Nada. You'll go by yourself. Anyway, so let's begin to look at the phrase a little bit more closely. Now that we have some geographical and historical possibilities there, we're going to look at this word "bagay" or gahi. Is the word ge or gay is actually gahi is how it's pronounced, and it is number 1516. Now, this word, of course, is a valley, and it is spelled with a bait, a gimel, a yod, and an aleph. So let's look at those letters. Let's see if it will tell us something about a valley in itself. And then we will look at the rest of the phrasing. Now, the bait, which we've talked about many times, and you know, is a picture of the floor plan or a tent. And it can mean house, and it can mean family or inside. And it's the first letter in the Torah that identifies the son of Yah, yes, but it also identifies the bride. When you think about because the bride helps build the house, right? The babe represents the bride or the wife, which builds the house, and it can be used to indicate her or the whole household itself. Now we have the letter Gimel, and a Gimel is the picture of a camel. Now, what did camels do? Camels carried burdens. They lifted up the burdens for the people whom they were working for. Now, this Gimel letter can mean to lift up, or also to lift up the name of the Lord, lift up the name of Yahweh. Keep that in mind. Then we have the Yod. The Yod is this picture of this arm or hand, and it means work or mighty deed, but it can also mean authority and power and strength. And then there's the Aleph. And the Aleph is a strong leader. The Aleph can also mean husband, a strong man of the house. So it's a shadow picture of our Messiah because he is the husband and he is the source of our strength. Amen? Yes, absolutely. So here we'll put these things together. What does this valley mean? In the house, the bride dwells with her husband who lifts up her burdens through his mighty deeds as the husband, as Messiah, as the olive top, actually. Now, how does that happen? Well, when you're walking through the valley, you definitely have burdens, right? There are situations that you're dealing with, things and circumstances that you didn't expect or that you did expect that you're having to work out. And we always know that Yah is supposed to be the burden carrier. We're supposed to let him carry those burdens for us. We don't always do it. Usually we try to sort things out ourselves first and make things right first. But that's not what we have in this word picture here. This word picture shows us that if we are connected to him, that he will lift up those burdens through his mighty deeds as our bridegroom, as our husband. Or we can do it in our own strength. And what happens? Failure. But the guy, he can also indicate this mental depression that can be associated with the future. So if you look at it as a mental ascent or a mental depression, you could say, yea, though I walk through the mental depression, I will not fear the shadow of death. Now, you may say, well, how does that make sense? Well, where are your battles fought? There are physical battles that we do have to fight, but they're fought between your ears, in your head. Yes, our thoughts are the word of Yah or the word of the enemy, which is allowed to exist in our mind and therefore comes forth out of our mouth as we dwell upon it, as we womb it, as it brings forth a life of its own. It's fought where? Right here. Yes, there may be physical action around us as well, but that's where we fight the biggest battles, win or lose them as well.
There we go. Yeah, I was just thinking about where it says that over in Second Corinthians, I think it's chapter 4. No, it's not there. But talking about that, it's not only in Ephesians chapter 6 where the weapons of warfare are not carnal, but it's also um, how we have to take every thought captive. And I'm going to have to look that up and find it real quick. Off the top of my head, I'm not finding it, but how important it is for us to take those thoughts captive, because the thing that the enemy does is the enemy really has only the power that we give him. And so if we give him the ability to influence us, if we give him the ability to speak those negative things or to pull us down and say the circumstances are too big, or life's too overwhelming, or my body cannot keep up with the demands that I need to keep up with, and we believe that those whisperings, then that's when we empower the enemy. And then that's when the enemy can then say, okay, I got my foothold there, I got some leverage there, now I'm going to take it to the next step. And that's what he definitely wants to do, is hold us down and use our thoughts against us.
And that's absolutely true. So now let's look.
Oh, I was going to give you this verse, 2 Corinthians 10:4. I had it backwards. Verse 3, though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations of every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God, against Elohim. And we are taking every thought captive for the obedience of Messiah. And we are ready to punish all disobedience whenever your obedience is complete. So it is a war and a battle for the mind. And a war is active. You cannot fight a war and think that you can do it with your thumbs, so to speak, like from your phone, from your from your Facebook on your phone. I mean, it's just not going to work. That's not a good way to fight battle.
That's absolutely true. So with that being said, let's go back and look at the phrase as we go through the letters. Let's look at the contronym of that. Let's look at what happens when Yahweh is not the head of our house and the husband to us. When you have the bait, the gimel, the yod, and the olive, you could look at it with those words meaning, the letters meaning the very same thing. Your house and lift up, which lift up, it can also be lifting up pride. It can be lifting up the work of your own strength. So when you lift up your works in your strength, what kind of valley do you face? A valley that will bring forth true death, a valley that is associated with the strength of your own hand, with your own pride, with the way you do things, with the way the world does things. It is all about you. So what is it like? It's like your ego. You're lifting up things in your own strength, in your own way. You don't think of it as a rift between mountain ranges. You think of it as a chasm in your own life. And you put everything in your perspective, how you can deal with it, how you can take care of it. When it's all about you, you're dead. Your ego has gotten so big, it's going to kill you. But what's David saying? He says, I want to find rest. And that's our goal, right? And rest is Yeshua, right? So we need to find him, find Yahweh, and follow his path to get there. But we surrender through that valley of death. So from this perspective, the valley of death could be, if you look at it from this angle, it's the way you think, and it's what you do, and it's who you have sitting on the throne, you or Yah. So any sheep that decides he's going to run the show of his own life is a dead sheep or dying. He may not even know it, but he is. So the dwelling place where pride is associated with the strength of your work, or the house where Yah's in control and he's lifting up your burdens and taking care of you as your bridegroom. We get to choose. Which is it? Which is it?
You know what? This is really interesting because, looking at the, some more of the meanings of that word, Uh, it seems like the root of the word seems to be opposite of what valley means. And valley, steep valley, narrow gorge, and then the root of it is means exaltation, arrogance, lifting up, pride. I mean, you've been talking about that. So, but it's talking about how the sides of the wall of that valley are so huge. And I'm thinking about when we were looking at that picture. Let me go back and share that picture again. And that has to do with how overwhelming it can be, if, let's see, trying to bring the screen back. Okay. All right. So how overwhelming is it if we were simply go down there and say, look at all the possibilities of rocks falling on my head. Look at all the possibilities of being robbed and all these robbers hiding there, like you talked about earlier. This is where we make those walls bigger than what they really are. We make our circumstances bigger because we're trying to look at it from a perspective of, oh my goodness, I'm way down here on the bottom and anything can collapse on me. But but uh, but in terms of what this verse is really talking about, it is that it's not about what the circumstances are, it's about who is with us. So, okay, I just had to throw those 2 cents in. But I was just kind of thinking about how ominous the walls can be if you're simply looking down at from the bottom going, wow, I'm down here by myself. I I might not live through this valley.
Well, and hence we have this idea that it's not just about death, it's about the dangerous and the dark and the gloomy paths we tread in our own life. Because we're all going to go down there on those paths, but our perspective will be much different when we trust in Yahweh, when we trust in Yah himself, and our focus is on him. Now, Barnes' commentary will say that the word shadow of death, when we get there, Zalmaveth, is applicable to any path of gloom or sadness in a scene of trouble or sorrow, any dark and dangerous way. So let's look at this word, Zamaveth, okay? Shadow of death. It doesn't necessarily always mean the shadow of death. When we look at it in Job, and by the way, it occurs in Job over and over, this phrasing, numerous places, but oftentimes it's called or referenced as black gloom or deep darkness, as well as or deep shadow or shadow of death. So we have this idea of dark and gloomy and shadowy, and death itself, yes, as well, all in this phrase when we use the shadow of death, deep darkness. Let's use that for a minute, because we did note that that valley itself has sunlight hitting the bottom of that valley only when? At noontime, their noontime. When the sun is directly overhead, the bottom of that valley is lit. Otherwise, it's what? It's dark. Now, deep darkness is much more than dark. When I think of deep darkness, I think of the Exodus. I think of the plagues. And I think of the darkness they experienced. And maybe we'll go there in a moment. But here we have the bottom of this valley is dark. Now, deep darkness, probably the closest thing we could find to that is when there's an absence of all light. Of course, that's darkness. Maybe you have been in a cave before and they've turned out the lights. If they have, if you've moved right or left or at all when the lights are out, it's likely you could hurt yourself or hurt somebody else because it's pitch black. You cannot see. And the shadow of death is a place where we don't have enough light to see what's happening. It's absolute darkness where you can't see the hand in front of your face. Yeah, that's dark. Absolutely. Now, when you hear a guide in a cave say, don't move, you better not move, lest you might face injury or others around you. But when you're full of pride and your ego is puffed up, you're also subject to death because that's darkness. You're living in darkness. It's like being in the bottom of that cave. It's like having no light anywhere in your life, even because darkness will descend into even deeper darkness when you're not following Yeshua. Now, in the Paleo Hebrew, what controls what you do and where you go? Well, it's your desire. Your desire controls. When you want your own way, which we do a lot, by the way, it's as if darkness and a cloud is descending upon you. And eventually you won't be able to see a thing, although you might think you do, but you do not. And so, can you possibly make the right choice when you cannot see clearly, physically or spiritually? Absolutely not. You think you can see, you think you know more than anybody else, but you're blind. That's what this word is. That is what this phrase is. Shadow of death, Zalmaveth. Zalmaveth. It's being a place where you can't see anything, but you still believe that you can. So there's deep darkness within your heart, all the way to the bottom, and you can't see. You believe you can see more clearly than the person next to you, but you're blind. Now, others may see that you're blind, but you are clueless to the fact. Even today, I think about just that phrase today. How many are in the valley of the shadow of death? They're in that place of the shadow of death where they think they see, but they can't. Look at the circumstances around us. Life means nothing. It has no value because life around us is thick darkness. And those who don't have Yah, those that don't search out the truth, think they see clearly and know what's right and what's wrong, but they do not. They are in a shadow of death. And for sheep, it's the sign that chaos is coming your way, that it's encroaching on your life and your circumstances, and maybe it's already covering you and you can't even see it because you're walking full of pride and this ego, and others from the outside may see it, at least those walking in truth. But you think you are in control, and really the one in control is the enemy controlling you. So that thick darkness has surrounded you and you have no idea what's going to happen next. You're blindly ignorant and maybe happy about it because you're in charge and you're having it your way. You will die there in that place without light. You can't see anything clearly. You can't see truth. You can't see what's in front of you even that's going to swallow you up because you're in that shadow of death where you and your pride and your way is what's guiding in you, which is really the enemy is the one guiding and leading you. John says that light was brought into the world, but the darkness hated the light. Why? Because the ego of the valley of the shadow of death. You refuse to look at what light is showing me. It's like there's a problem in your life, but you refuse to examine the truth of it, the root of it, because you don't want to see what's there and you don't want to change. And you want to remain blissfully ignorant, declaring you're fine. Or, yeah, maybe that problems exist, but you will never be able to remove those issues that you're dealing with until you get to the root of the problem, until you admit they're there, and until you turn your countenance and your face to him and you trust in him in all things. Yeah. But we don't want to look at it. Guys, we may say that's our friend or our neighbor over there, but oftentimes that's us. We don't want to take care of that thing that's plaguing us, that causes darkness to enter in. So what do? We remain blissfully ignorant. All right, now we're going to barrel through this pretty quick because we're getting low on time. Let's look at the Paleo Hebrew as we spell this word, and it's the Zadik Lamed Mem Vav and Tav. Now the Zadi, is the picture of this fish hook, or signifies a fish hook, and also desire. So think about that. And then we have the Lamed, which is the picture of the shepherd's staff, and it's to teach, to goad, but it carries this connotation that there's also a pricking or a stinging, something that leads you and when necessary prods you, teaches you, or controls you. This thing that controls you. Now, the mem, which is the picture of the water and the fluid and the firmament, and can be that chaos, that destructive tsunami, or the gentle rain that brings forth life, and the living water. And when it's the living water, it's as if you are are carrying life within you, and you're pregnant with this idea, these thoughts, these things, and they're bringing forth this life. Something's being birthed. Okay. So chaos or life. Chaos or life. And then you have that vav, which is that connector, which means you're connected. One thing is connected to the other. It's putting two objects together. And then your tav, which is symbolizes or a sign of a mark or truth or a sign. And put that together, it means your desire has control to bring forth chaos or life and connects you to your mark. You may say, my mark. Well, you're going to have a sign on you, one or the other. It's going to be the sign of the enemy or a sign of Yah. What mark do we carry? Our desire. If our desire is him, if our desire is rest, it's going to bring forth life and connect us to him, and we will be marked with his mark. But if our desire is things of ourselves and things of the world, chaos will ensue, and it connects us with his mark, with the world system. So this word for darkness, desire, control, chaos, secure, sign. So I want to hold that thought. We're going to look next week. We'll start with finishing this off and looking at sin crouching at the door, and that its desire is for you, and how that bears or comes into meaning with this subject that we're speaking of right now. So you want to stay tuned for the third part of verse 4. And until the next time, then we will continue this talk.
All right. Well, good. Boy, that's good. I was just thinking about so many different issues. I was actually looking up some other verses there, Sandy, that you brought up in Job and the shadow of death. So I can't wait till next week. Well, stay tuned. On the other side, you're going to have to go to the website, lamnetwork.tv, to watch the Craig Report, because we've got a lot of news to talk about there, and we'll see you on the other side.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.